Hello, my wonderful, beautiful friends. Guys, welcome back to our /MaliciousCompliance, where people follow orders to spite someone. And in today's episode, it's all about dumb bosses getting taught lessons, guys. And OP's Karen boss tries so hard to fire her, and it ends up backfiring. Guys, if you've ever had a bad boss, this one's for you. I hope you enjoy the stories, don't shake your heads too hard, and as always, you can send or link your post to this email right here. Let's dive in. So there was the perfect example of malicious compliance one evening at the bus depot that my brother and I used to work at quite some time ago. Here's the backstory. My brother started out as a laborer, cleaning buses, moving them to correct locations, and other miscellaneous tasks throughout the night. The supervisor was a stubborn jackass who always knows best. The supervisor was telling my brother to perform a task that was a little risky. Everyone in the area could hear the conversation pretty well because we worked close together. One night, the supervisor said to move a certain bus in between two other buses that were parked a little too close together. The conversation went sort of like this. My brother tells him, "I don't feel comfortable backing a bus in there, that's pretty close." Supervisor tells him, "I thought you were good at parking these, that's your job." My brother tells him, "I am, but those are a little bit too close, it won't fit." Supervisor tells him, "Well, make it fit." And I'm sure you can see where the malicious compliance is about to come into play. The supervisor told him to stop making excuses for not wanting to work. He assumed that all the workers were lazy because it's union. After a few more moments of back and forth, my brother tells him, "Okay, will do, boss," and he begins the task. As he backed in, everyone in the shop starts staring because they knew it would be bad. The whole shop was taken over by the loud scraping noises, and that's when the super ran over yelling, "What the hell are you doing?" My brother tells him, "You told me to do this, I'm making it fit." By this time, the supervisor was pissed, and he said, "Well, now you have to write an incident report, idiot." Well, my brother was compliant on that end as well. As he wrote the incident report, he reads it out loud. He said, "Supervisor told me to park bus in lot C. I explained I didn't feel comfortable and it wouldn't fit. He told me to make it fit and to do it." Before he could finish, the supervisor cuts him off and said, "Stop, what are you doing?" My brother tells him, "Writing the incident report." The supervisor, realizing he's lost the battle, says, Okay, you know what? Don't worry about it, I'll take care of this." To which brother tells him, "Okay, that's fine." Everybody watched as this happened, and it was the talk around the shop for quite a long time. Management never brought this incident back up, and the supervisor must have brushed it under the rug as to not get himself in trouble. About a year after, my brother was actually promoted to supervisor, and then eventually to manager of the shop, where he still is today. Guys, it sounds like OP's brother really tried to throw his boss under the bus for that one, right? And honestly, if that were me, I might have kept writing that incident report to teach that supervisor a hard lesson. Like, why not take it all the way? And for all who are wondering why OP's brother didn't just get out and move one bus away from the other bus, it couldn't have been done as there were 13 buses parked side by side, and that would have taken way too much time. So yeah, it does kind of suck that that bus was damaged on purpose, but hey, sweet malicious compliance nonetheless. I used to work at a restaurant/events venue some years back. Essentially, I was assistant GM of the place, and it was my job to coordinate service in the dining room, private event spaces, and the music venue. Service, concerts, private events, weddings, you name it. I coordinate and execute it with staff. This was the most challenging job I'd ever had at the time. But after a while, I had found a groove, and I was doing the work of 2 or 3 people. And that's when a new GM gets hired. I did like her, and she likes me. She recognizes my hard work, and she's glad to have me. I work 50 to 60 hours a week, and I'm regularly there until 2 or 3 in the morning, wrapping things up. I'm the last person in the building. I also have a good relationship with the CEO and the HR of the company, as we were one of the 6 large franchises across the country. They like me, and I like them, and we also have good rapport. I'm working my ass off, but I'm really having fun too. I absolutely loved the job. So with that said, fast forward a few months and the relationship between me and the GM sours. She basically turns into a Karen boss. The woman's colder and more hostile towards me every day. Now I'm not sure what's going on, so I ask if we can talk. She then calls a closed-door meeting and she arrives with a folder with some papers in it. She then pulls out her cell phone and she asks my permission to record. And I'm thinking, that's odd, but yeah, sure, have fun. She then proceeds to lay out papers in front of me, documenting all of my shortcomings. 7 minutes late, timestamp verified. Now, I do want to note that on that day, there was a blizzard, and I wasn't late. I actually volunteered to come in early as other employees refused to drive. Another thing was inappropriate language in front of team members. And for this one, managers were joking and doing Sam Jackson mother effer impressions, and I used the F word, and no one else got written up. She also brought up a complaint from rehearsal dinner. Again, time-stamped. The bride in a sleeveless dress was cold and we turned the heat up. It just went on, like 15 total, completely fabricated charges against me. At this point, it's clear she's out to get me and she wants to get me fired or something, but I have no clue why. She then tells me that I should probably think about putting in my 2 weeks notice because it's looking really bad for me. And at that, I'm thinking, okay, so I immediately start looking for another job, and I actually nail one shortly with a better title and pay. Now, something important to know is we always had these big weekly meetings on what was usually my day off. So I'd have to come in on my day off and sit in a meeting with a bunch of other managers, event directors, and chefs. These meetings were mandatory. I was never happy about it, but I complied, as everyone else there relied on me to coordinate service and events. So after one of these meetings, I went out for a quick beer with a coworker who was a captain. Essentially an event manager for us who would run smaller events. We got to talking, and she told me that GM Karen was afraid that I was gonna take her job and she wants to get rid of me. Karen had let it slip to a chef during setup of an event, and Captain overheard while working. And I'm thinking, wild, I don't want your job, I'm too busy already. So cue the malicious compliance. Our HR policies were a bit wonky, as the COO/HR didn't really have experience with HR stuff. He was a great guy, but he cobbled together some awkward policies. In our official handbook, it was stated that the company prefers a 3-week notice, but accepts a 2-week notice as industry standard. And in cases where the employee feels wronged, threatened, or unfairly targeted, a 1-week notice is also acceptable. Also, if the employee feels wronged, threatened, or unfairly targeted, it's also acceptable for said employee to go over the head of their wronging, threatening, unfairly targeting boss directly to HR to submit their notice. So with that, I follow company policy. I send the COO/HR an email giving my resignation. I briefly outline my reasons, thank him for all of his wisdom and help, and give my 1-week, 168-hour notice effective immediately. I don't get a response from him. That's because he's on vacation in Greece. A week later, I cheerily show up for the mandatory meeting at noon on my day off. The meeting commences, and GM Karen is making a show of trying to call me out on BS in front of the group for answers about the 300-person wedding event that I'm due to run tomorrow, trying to cement my incompetence to them. She tells me that we're out of a certain champagne. No, we're not, and asked me what we're gonna sub for the party's toast. She did this intending to catch me caught in the cold, as it's too late to order an appropriate substitute. My response in front of everyone is, honestly, I don't know and I don't care. This is my last day, and I finished work 15 minutes ago, so good luck with the wedding. And with that, I walked out. Cue the shocked boss. The entire table was O-faced. There was a volley of emails after that between Karen and the COO/HR trying to deny my sick/vacation payouts, but I had technically followed all company policies. She had to put her signature on my final check. Sweet. And the fallout was also sweet. Here's what happened. Apparently GM Karen gets an earful from the COO when he got back from vacation. He didn't buy the laundry list of charges against me, as he's always known me to be a great employee, and he could tell that she was angling to get me canned. He was even more pissed at the fact that if she was going to get rid of me, why was she so stupid to not have my replacement lined up? She lost a great manager, put the business in a horrible position, and he was very pissed that it exposed the company to a potential lawsuit due to the wedding muck-up. They end up promoting a server who had no experience but would work 60 hours a week on minimal salary, and that went how you'd expect. As for GM Karen, she was way too busy/lazy to oversee service and events, and she failed to see how the new manager was failing to direct and execute. That led to events tanking, service tanking, clients pissed off, etc. And did I mention that 7 of their best employees followed me to my new place? Because they did. And it just kept getting worse. Staff started quitting as they got understaffed, overworked, scheduled doubles for 4 days in a row. Morale went to hell, and they started canceling events that were long booked and paid for. And they had to issue tens of thousands of dollars in refunds back to clients for shoddily executed events. They tried to hire and train tons of new staff in a really short period of time, and the place got such a bad reputation after that. GM Karen was gone not even 2 months later. Guys, I always love hearing how a new boss comes in and basically destroys a well-run business, all because they're totally useless. And no friggin' wonder Karen was intimidated by OP taking her position. She absolutely knew that OP did the job better than she did. And honestly guys, I could never tell you how people like this become managers in the first place, and it's absolutely wild how one person can show up and single-handedly bring down a successful business. And honestly, it does suck that OP left such a great company that they loved, but you know what they say guys, people do not leave jobs, they leave bad bosses. Many moons ago, I worked at a residential treatment center doing direct care with teens. In most jobs, breaks are built in, and they're a guaranteed part of the workday. This was not the case here. We had compliance concerns around mandatory staff-to-client ratios, and this often made it difficult and sometimes impossible to get a break during your shift. That being said, most of us working the line had a pretty good system worked out for trying to get folks on break. If we happened to notice that all the kids and staff were present on the unit at the same time, we would have somebody take a break, and then hold off on moving with programming until they returned. After working there for approximately 2 years, the guy that ran the residential unit was let go for stealing from the clients. A real nice guy. At this point, they hired a new guy to take over. He hadn't worked at our agency before, and he had never done direct care himself before. He did have experience in positions in agencies similar to ours. So he came in, as most administrators do, that have no experience of the job, and he thought he knew best about everything. Pretty quickly, he became concerned that we were taking advantage of taking breaks throughout the day, which couldn't have been further from the truth. Again, most days you were lucky if you got a break at all, and that includes while working double shifts. So the guy came up with a plan that in order to take a break, you needed his permission. Now, during the daytime when he was present at the unit, this wasn't a huge deal. You could simply walk over and ask him. But this immediately became a problem, however, for staff working evening, overnights, and weekend shifts, who would then need to call him to get permission. Anywho, I'm someone who's always up for following rules. So during my first shift, as I was shift supervisor and therefore responsible for the other staff working during my shifts, I asked everybody to please do as he asked. By the end of that first shift, not one single person had gotten a break. Each time we had an opportunity ratio-wise, we'd give him a call, which he wouldn't answer. By the time he called back 30 minutes to an hour later, the opportunity for a break was gone. When I showed up the next day, I explained to him what happened the previous evening and asked him to reconsider, but the guy refused. So I then did what any logical person would do. I told my staff to call him when they wanted a break, and if he didn't answer, they were to call again and again and again until we reached him. He probably received upwards of 40 phone calls that shift, and I should also note, of which he answered none. Sadly, this did result in none of us getting a break that night, but by the time I showed up for my next shift, we had an email from him letting us know that we no longer needed to call him and get permission for breaks. That is absolutely crappy what happened to OP and their coworkers, and there is no way that OP should have followed that order to call the man to get permission for a break. Especially if he's the new guy implementing such a ridiculous rule, right? And the thing is, OP and the crew have been there long enough to be able to know when and how long people can go for breaks. So yeah, I would have told that guy to pound sand. With that said though, I'm pretty sure with every job, you're entitled to a break every few hours, right? Like that's a labor law. So there I was, working at a mid-sized IT firm as a software developer. My team had always been pretty laid back, focusing on results rather than the exact hours we were glued to our desks. Our projects were delivered on time, our clients were happy, and our team morale was high. That is, until we got a new project manager who we'll call Dave. Dave was fresh from a highly regimented corporate background, and he had ideas about proper workplace management, which basically meant micromanaging everything. The guy scheduled unnecessary daily status meetings, demanded we fill out hourly work logs, and insisted that everyone strictly adhere to 9 to 5 office hours with minimal breaks. One day, during one of his infamous efficiency crackdowns, he sent out this email with a new policy that all coding must be done strictly within office hours to ensure collaboration and supervision. Now, this was ridiculous because creative work like coding often requires flexible hours for maximum productivity. But Dave was adamant, and he ended his email with, "If you think you can find a loophole, think again. Follow the rules or we'll find someone who will." With that, I thought, challenge accepted, Dave. I decided to comply meticulously. I coded strictly between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m., not a minute earlier, not a second later. If I encountered a bug or was in the middle of a complex piece of code, too bad. 5 p.m. means the end, no matter what. My teammates, who were also fed up with being treated like school children, followed my lead, and the results were predictable. Projects that usually took a couple of weeks started dragging on. Things that we could have completed in days with a bit of overtime took much longer, because we couldn't capitalize on the bursts of late afternoon productivity we were used to. Workflow was severely disrupted, and the quality of our work starts to deteriorate. And Dave noticed, of course. He had to answer to upper management for the sudden drop in productivity and the lack of commitment, which he knew was a result of our dissatisfaction with his new policy. When upper management called for an impromptu Zoom meeting with the entire team at 4:30 to address the ongoing project delays, the entire team logs in to explain our situation. In the meeting, Dave spent an hour shifting blame and berating individual team members. He didn't even mention the 9 to 5 policy that had led to the whole situation. As the clock ticked towards 5 p.m., the tension in the virtual room was palpable, and our team hatches a plan over text. Right on cue, as the clock struck 5 p.m., one of the employees spoke up and said, "In compliance with Dave's 9 to 5 rule, we must log off right now." And without missing a beat, every team member clicked "Leave meeting," leaving a stunned Dave to face the executives alone. This abrupt mass exiting highlighted the impracticality of Dave's rigid policy, making it clear to the executives that change was necessary. The incident, which was quickly dubbed as the 5 o'clock Zoom exodus, led to another meeting, where Dave was publicly admonished and instructed to abolish his strict rules in favor of more flexibility. And as for me and my team, we made sure to celebrate the little victory with a well-deserved happy hour. After 5 p.m., of course. That's one way to teach a boss a hard lesson, guys. Let him suffer in front of the big guys. And on paper, in a perfect world, what Dave implemented might have worked flawlessly. But like OP said, with the way everybody was working and how things were going, sometimes it's best not to fix something that isn't broken until you've thoroughly understood the current workflow or procedures. And I say that because I had a new boss like that too, guys. I worked at a place for 10 years and it ran as efficiently as possible until my boss retired and this new guy came in. And the whole time, the new guy was like, "Yep, we're just gonna make the place run even more efficiently. You'll see." Like, the guy had all these plans and he starts implementing all these new rules and procedures, which actually cut down production by half. Because what he didn't know is that, guys, we were in fact a shady-ass company, I'm just gonna say that cut corners to increase production, and we were already running at 110% efficiency. I don't know where I'm going with this, but yeah, don't fix something that ain't broke. End of story. So I work in accounting, and my assistant is out on this particular day, so I'm working on invoicing. While doing the invoicing, I come across a work order that has a higher expense amount than invoice amount. So realizing that we'll be losing $100 on the job instead of at least breaking even, I decide to question the manager, Chad, about it. I say to Chad, "Hey, I noticed this job has an anomaly. Can you explain it to me?" Chad says, "What are you talking about?" I say to him, "See the expenses? They reach a higher total than the amount you want me to bill for. I want to see if that's a mistake or..." He then interrupts me and says, "Nope, that's right." I say to him, "If that's right, we're gonna lose money on this job." Chad says, "I'm telling you it's right." He then rips the paper from my hand and he says, "See, we charge a 20% markup right there." The guy actually points to the wrong spot and he has the audacity to look smug. He tells me, see, it's fine. I calmly take the papers back and I show him 2 amounts side by side. I tell him, I see that, but you didn't account for that over here for the billing amount. The total billing amount is less than that. That's when Chad tells me, look, it's right, and I don't have time to explain it to you. Just do what I said and stop bothering me. At that I say, no problem. Can you just initial here so when our boss asks me why this job's invoice so low, I can... He interrupts me and says, sure, fine, whatever. The guy signs his name next to the billing amount, and he says, get out of my space. So I go back to my office, and I invoice the too low amount. I sent it off, fully knowing that this was gonna backfire, and I kept all the backups and copies handy for when it did. Next Monday, I have the boss in my office. The invoice in question is in his hand. My boss says to me, hey, you did this invoice wrong. He then shows me the invoice, and I say, actually, if you look at the backup, Chad told me that that was the invoice amount. I then show him where Chad signed off, and boss says, I'll be right back. He left my office, and roughly an hour later, I get called into my boss's office. Chad's there looking uncomfortable, and my boss is on the phone. He waved me inside, and I sat down. My boss says, all right, we're all here. Now, please explain this to me, OP. I tell him, well, I noticed the expenses on this invoice were higher than the billing amount. Chad told me that the numbers were fine, and to just do the invoice. My boss then says out loud, you hear that, Tex? Tex is the subcontractor we used on this job, and he's on speakerphone. Tex replies, yep, so what are we gonna do? My boss says, the only thing to do is fire them. They're either incompetent or they're cheating us. Either way, it's bad for business. At this point, I'm very concerned for my job, but I sit silently, as I don't have the whole story yet. Tex then says, I reckon you're right. Good luck. And don't worry about the park job. I got an opening up tomorrow I can squeeze in. Boss tells him, thanks, Tex. He then hangs up the phone and he turns to Chad, and Chad's gone from nervous to mad. Chad says, it's not my fault she can't do her job. Boss then tells Chad, you signed your name right next to the wrong amount. Now either you're working with someone in accounting over in Texas company to steal from me, or you're too stupid to work here. Which one is it? At this point, Chad stands, as does my boss, and I stand too, because I don't like being the only person sitting, and Chad says nothing. My boss then says, you're fired. Go get your computer and leave. My boss then turns to me and says, go ahead and fill out the paperwork for his leave. Make sure to add that he attempted to embezzle money. I just nod and leave, and Chad stays there. As soon as I leave the office, it explodes in screaming. I stayed in my office doing the paperwork my boss asked me to fill out. I then saw Chad leave later with his stuff thrown haphazardly into his bag. And that was the last time I saw Chad. A friend saw him working at a cash register at a buffet place a month later. It turns out, both my boss and Tex had agreed to lower their markups for the job, so the invoice number was still too high. But I didn't know that until after the fact, when my boss had me redo the paperwork for the entire job. Someone from accounting in Texas company had altered the invoice sent to Chad, and they were planning on splitting the difference after we paid and altered the bill. Guys, I'm shaking my head so hard at this, like all of that to split $100, like the things some people do for extra cash. And it's not even worth it, in my opinion. And guys, that's probably not the first time he's done that, right? Like only the first time he's been caught. Unless he did that to test the waters, and if they'd gotten away with it, he'd have gone for a larger amount. Who knows? Who cares? Because he doesn't work there anymore. And that, my friends, brings us to another end of r/MaliciousCompliance. Guys, I hope you enjoyed today's stories. If you did, hit that thumbs up. And if you're not subscribed, consider subscribing so you don't miss these crazy stories. And if you missed the last episode on the channel, it's an r/entitled People episode, where it's all about trespassers getting exactly what they deserve. Guys, go check it out if you haven't. And myself and Stevie Boy will see you guys in the next one. We love you.